Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everybody. I will try to give you a small summary of the policy issues of biofuels in Brussels, and then I will move a little bit to the technology and more or less tell you what has been happening in Europe and some other parts of the world on advanced biofuels. First of all, the idea about using biomass is to start from a resource or a waste and try to increase the value of the final product you're going to be doing. And probably you don't see it very well, but at least on there are two basic, let's say, routes, the biological and thermochemical. The biological route, you start from biomass, you extract the sugars with the enzymes, and then you can use the sugars either to produce chemicals, or you can produce fuels, or again, you can ferment them with yeast to produce ethanol. And you can use the ethanol in the market, replace petrol, or even if you want to proceed further, you can upgrade the ethanol into biokerosene for applications in the aviation sector. The other line is what we call the synthetic biofuels, and you start from biomass, you gasify the biomass, and you try to produce what's called the synthesis gas. Basically, this is a mixture of carbon monoxide and hydrogen, and if you apply a catalyst to that mixture, you can more or less produce a variety of chemicals, which can be anything from methanol, ethanol, fischer-tropsch, dimethyl ether, and so on. And again, you can take the synthesis gas, instead of going from fuels, you can go to chemicals. Another thermochemical line is to pyrolyze the biomass, and then you produce pyrrhus oil, which can use it back into gasification if you want, and that is try to increase the energy density of biomass, because biomass, if you have straw, it is big volume but low energy density. If you pyrolyze it to an oil, you have small volume, high energy density. And again, with the pyrrhus oils, you can put it for chemicals, or you can upgrade it, or you can actually co-process it in petroleum refineries to produce various biofuels, or even biojet and other materials. And finally, last, we have more of the waste streams that you take, like waste cooking oil, and you hydrotreat it to produce what's called hydrogenated vegetable oils. And with these oils, you can more or less replace diesel or even kerosene for the aviation sector. So there's a variety of, I would say, value chains and applications, and the industry has been working in all this, try to develop technologies to commercialize them. What has been achieved, and this is more or less what's called the mountain of death, because in the beginning of the left-hand side, basically you start research, you have a lot of innovation, but the investment is low. But as you go up to the large-scale demonstration projects, the investments go high. And unless you come to the top, to the first-of-a-kind plant, and go to down the valley to build the second and third plant, you don't make any money, you just invest. So the investment goes high on the top. And many technologies, they never reach the top, or some of them, they reach the top and they fall down again. So basically what we've achieved at this moment, there's a lot of work on microbial conversion of biomass to fuels. From between the pilot phase to the demo phase, we have the algae project and biokerosene. For example, if you take from the cellulosic ethanol process, the lignin, which is a residue, you can upgrade it to kerosene fuels. And on the first demonstration plant, we have the biodimethyl ether, which was built in Sweden. What are the very successful first-of-a-kind plants? That means built, they're the first commercial plants globally ever built. On the top, we have the short recovered fuels gasification to alcohols, and that is a plant built by ENER in Canada. Then we have a plant in Finland to produce, Sweden to produce biomethane from wood waste. So you gasify wood waste, you synthesize it into biomethane. Then there's another plant in Finland that started very recently. You take again sawdust, you extract the sugars with enzymes. This is a very difficult process. And then you go to ethanol. And finally, we have the pyrrhus oils. And the only value chain so far that has reached the commercialization is the one of cellulosic ethanol, basically based on agro-residues like straw and corn residues, corn stubble, and things like that. So from all these value chains, although a lot of research is going on for many years, a lot of investment, only one value chain has been able to achieve the commercialization and build a second or a third plant, or give the license for a second or third plant. How we look at the things in the European Commission, we always try to compare the existing technology and the existing markets and say how we can move new technology in new markets. And on existing technology, we have the hydrogenated or hydrotreated vegetable oils. This is more or less commercial. Cellulosic ethanol, we said there was one plant that has been able to commercialize the technology, and pyrolysis oils. There have been 2 or 3 that actually they're selling the oil in commercial applications. In market development, we are looking to have hydrotreated vegetable oils and moving away from palm oil, because the palm oil has been created a lot of turbulence in Brussels because of the issue of indirect land use change, the famous ILUC issue. Then try to develop the market specifically in the pulp and paper industry of biodimethyl ether, the BioDME, and finally biomethane, because biomethane can be used in various applications, very flexible. You can put it in the grid, you can actually produce power or heat, or you can put it in cars and transport buses. And actually on the biomethane, we're developing specific standards for transport applications. On product development, we still have to go ahead with synthetic biofuels, and because this, as I said, the only plant we have for the moment is in Canada. Algal oils, they still have some time to go because actually they are much more expensive. And the algae industry, they are looking much more to biochemicals, materials, or cosmetics, rather than actually fuels. Direct conversion of sugars, long way to go. Bacterial conversion, even longer. And finally, to try to diversify so far what we are doing, we are looking to have the biofuel to the aviation sector. So far, they have many test flights done, and actually commercial flights with hydrotreated vegetable oils. Heavy-duty transport, there have been some successes again with the dimethyl ether, but it cannot be commercialized yet. Maritime transport, there's a lot of discussion on how to improve the emissions from the maritime transport, and of course, biochemicals, because biochemicals, the biofuels, go hand in hand in the biorefineries. Some successes in Europe, I don't know if you can read that. The first ever plant built on cellulosic ethanol was by the company by Chemtex in Italy. This was the first plant, and it was the plant that was able to commercialize the technology. The EU enzyme companies, such as Novozymes, DSM, and Abengoa, are world leaders. And actually, all the plants that have been built, even in the States, they're based on European know-how on the enzymes. For example, Abengoa built the plant in the US. The POET DSM project is based on DSM enzymes and yeast. And finally, DuPont, which is an American company, but for the enzymes, they just bought over Genecor. Genecor was a Danish company, very successful, like Novozymes, on producing enzymes and yeast. So DuPont has done. So basically, we have a lot of innovation in Europe, and actually it's used globally. Then we have 3 large-scale demonstration projects on algae facilities, but this, as I said, they look a little bit further down the road. The pyrolysis projects of the Biomass Technology Group of the Netherlands, it was the first project on pyrolysis oils to sign a long-term contract to provide pyrolysis oils to replace natural gas in a milk factory in the Netherlands. So a milk factory wants to go completely green, and they want to replace the natural gas, which is a very clean fuel, with pyrolysis oils, which of course you can understand how clean the combustion is to take place. The BioDME project, which took place in the pulp and paper industry in Sweden. It was the first one by Chemrec. Chemrec has developed technology for many years. And finally, you know that Neste is a global company with 4 plants producing hydrogenated vegetable oils. It was the first company to commercialize that. They have 2 small facilities of 150,000 tons per year in Finland, 2 other facilities of 800,000, one facility of 800,000 tons in Singapore, and a big one of 1 million tons per year in Rotterdam. There is a tendency, and you see that the European refineries, in order to come into the market, they try to retrofit complete refineries to produce hydrotreated vegetable oils. For example, ENER in Italy, they already retrofitted outside of Venice refinery to produce HVOs based on palm oil. Total is commissioning a plant in the south, close to Marseille, in the south of France. And UPM, it is basically a pulp and paper company. They have been more or less, they start producing HVOs from tall oil. Tall oil is a byproduct of the pulp and paper industry. So a lot of activity, a lot of innovation is taking place in Europe, and the European Commission will help to finance all these projects via our research projects and programs. I had the privilege to chair what is called the subgroup on advanced biofuels. It was a request from our colleagues from DG Move to try to come up with what is the opinion of the industry about biofuels and advanced biofuels, what the industry needs in order to be able to commercialize these ones. And we created a company of about 34, I would say, all value chains. They were present over there, people from the transport sector were present, and we produced various reports. One, the Building Up the Future final report, it was talking about the policy, what it's need to be done. There were 2 other reports on technology and cost of biofuels. And basically these reports, they were published in April of this year. And they are, I would say, the most state-of-the-art reports, one can find at least about the European situation. But the technology and the cost of biofuels is global, covering all, I would say, all areas. I'm going now a little bit to policy. You should know that the current policy in the European Union proposes to meet 10% renewable energy in transport. And with the renewable energy, we need biofuel, but also renewable electricity. There was a revision of the directive in 2013 that because of the earlier discussion, they proposed to limit crop-based biofuels to 7%. And last November, the Commission made a proposal to revise the directive, which is called the RED II. And basically, in that proposal, it's more or less summarized in this kind of figure, that you see that the blue in the bottom is decreased from 7% to 3.8%. That is the crop-based biofuels. The waste-based, the white line in the middle, is more or less about waste streams, and basically quite some advances in the advanced biofuels and fuels on the top of the yellow from what we call the renewable electricity. If you have waste electricity and you don't know what to do, you can recover the hydrogen via and produce other biofuels. Now, the SCAB, the subgroup of advanced biofuels, looked at this data and actually was very critical and came up that basically the industry can deliver under, I would say, current policies, more or less, with some, of course, more coherence on the long-term perspective, a minimum between something 13% to almost 17% on advanced biofuels. By keeping stable the food and crop-based biofuels, by more or less having equal targets between the cellulosic fuels and the lipid-based fuels, like used cooking oils and waste streams from palm oil industry and other streams, e-fuels coming out from renewable electricity, and of course the low-carbon fossil fuels, that carbon capture utilization. So basically we came with this structure, and I'm not going to go too much more into the details. How it looks like, basically this is the progressive scenario. It looks that we can achieve almost, I would say, 58 MTOE if we have the right policies and the right financial instruments in the European Union. And basically, on the right-hand side, you see the percentage of CO2 savings. On the left-hand side, you see the actual million tons of CO2 equivalent saved. So let's say, assuming that we keep the progressive scenario, we could save approximately 9.5% of CO2 emissions, or the equivalent of approximately 110 million tons of CO2 equivalent. Now, this work was followed by what we call the alt fuels formula. You cannot read that, I'm sorry about that, but basically in the middle, we have the transport sectors, which is basically aviation, heavy duty, maritime, and passenger cars. And on the left-hand side, vertical down, we have the various technologies that we cover all the value chains. We have international cooperation on the top with Canada, US, and India. From India, we have Dr. Ramakrishna, who is more or less representing India in the group. On the right-hand side, we have various, let's say, advisors, we call them, that we have very close coordination with IEA Bioenergy and IEA Renewable Energy Division in Paris. Also, we have a working group on financing, another working group on resources. So basically, we've tried to put together all the industry to try to think about what has to be done if we're going to achieve the targets of advanced biofuels in the European Union, and what kind of, let's say, assurance the industry needs to invest, because we're talking here about billions of euros. We're not talking about 100 million, something like that. We're talking about billions. And more or less, again, I have highlighted some of the names that they are more well known. As I said, we have 15 leaders that they lead the various sectors. We have here, for example, the Minister of Petroleum from India with Dr. Ramakrishna. We have Neste, we have Volvo Group. From advisors, we have IEA Bioenergy and other, for example, as members, we have Airbus, Air France, ArcelorMittal, Audi, DuPont, ENI, Total, KLM, all these kind of companies that are together. So basically, we have from all the sectors, and here we have the observers. We have from all the sectors, I would say, the key players in Europe, and of course, global, some of them, they're global players, and we see how we can, all of them, come up with ideas to have a common voice, agreed results, how to proceed. I leave now the policy behind, and I'm trying to go very quickly what has been achieved so far in terms of technology, and I would say the very advanced state of the various biofuels. And this is the hydrogenated vegetable oils. The most advanced, I would say, in terms of size is the one in the middle from Neste. It's 1 million tons per year in Rotterdam facility. On the top, on the right-hand side, is the UPM facility producing HVOs from tall oil in Finland. And in the bottom, you see whatever you can see, is the big refinery of, 2 minutes, it's the big refinery of ENER in Italy. I'll go fast. Here is the synthetic biomethane route On the top, you have the energy plant. Of course, this is a Canadian technology. In the middle, you have the Gobi gas in Kodeberg in Sweden, which takes sawdust to produce biomethane. And down right, in the right bottom, you have the black liquor gasification to DME. And that was a very successful because Volvo produced a dedicated engine to operate these vehicles. And the small figures you see there are two trucks that were operating under commercial conditions in Sweden on DME. Operating oils, you have the BTG plant in the Netherlands. In the middle, you have the Fortum plant in Finland. And in the bottom, you have the NC plant in Canada. So all these are facilities actually operating more or less on the commercial stage. This is the most successful, I would say, value chain that has been widespread success either in Europe or in the US. On the very top is the first ever built, the Crescentino plant in Italy. And on the base of that, the Gran Bio project in Brazil was built. So Biochemtex was able to license the technology to Brazil. In the bottom, you see in the middle the small plant of Abengoa that was built in Spain. And on the base of the results of that plant, Abengoa built the plant in the US. So you see innovation comes out from Europe, but the investments sometimes take place elsewhere because in the US they have better financing or I would say more stable policies. And again, in the bottom, the two American technologies, the DuPont and the POET DSM. Two other projects, the three other ones. The one on the top is the sawdust to ethanol. Again, this is first of a kind. Never before has been in this scale. Clarion in the middle is building now a facility of 60,000 tons of ethanol from agricultural residues. And at the bottom, you have the demonstration plant of Inbicon in Denmark. On power to gas or power to liquid, you have on the top the Audi e-gas project in Germany. And lower, you have the CRI power to methanol. This plant, of course, is not supported by the European Commission, but this one, the one in Iceland is the largest plant because of very cheap price of electricity from geothermal energy that's abundant in Iceland. On Algem, I will skip that. There's a lot of work to be done before they're going to become commercial. And more or less now to summarize the very sort of technology, as you can see, all the technology developers in the various value chains for the various transport sectors, they've been able to have more or less huge progress, success in building these plants, but still there are barriers to commercialize and put these technologies and these plants to the market. The main reason is the lack of stable and long-term policies. If now an investor will decide to build a facility, it will take him 3 years before he gets the permits, before he builds the plant, before he commissioning it. And after that, he needs minimum 10 to 15 years period to be able to recover back the investment he has done. Now, in Brussels, we have been changing the policy every 3 to 4 years. And of course, that doesn't give any confidence to an investor because he doesn't know what might happen in 2025 and so on. So this is a major problem for the investors, and it hinders really the commercialization. So actually, the key message the industry has, we need long-term, stable policies. Coming to an end. And the other major problem is the financial instruments. We need dedicated financial instruments because in electricity, it's very easy because you have the feed-in tariffs. You build a plant, you sign a contract with the government, you have the feed-in tariffs, you have the guarantee for 8-10 years of an income. On biofuels, you don't have that. We tried to do it with the policy, but have not been very successful. So this kind of first-of-a-kind plants, they always need dedicated, let's say, financing to be able to cover the technical risks that they face in the construction of the plant. Thank you for your attention, and I hope it was on time.
So, questions or comments from the audience? Are there any questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Maniatis, you have a very good idea about different commercial plants around the world. What are your comments about lignin, which is produced as a waste product, what the world is doing with lignin valorization? Either it is going for burning or any value-added product you would suggest is useful.
If I'm understanding correctly, you're asking about the lignin byproduct of the ethanol. So far in Europe, they burn the lignin to produce, for example, the Crescentino plant, they burn the lignin to produce power and heat to run the facility, and actually they sell the power to the grid of ENER. Why? Because they have a very high feed-in tariff. But also, by Chemtech, they have a contract with the European Commission to look how to convert the lignin into aviation biofuel. And of course, you can take the lignin and produce chemicals out of it. For example, Borregaard in Norway, they basically, the command, they've been working with the lignin and they produce various chemicals out of it. So there are different ways of doing it, and of course, it's always site-specific. So for example, in Italy, it makes sense to burn it because you get a high 15 tariff. In other countries, it might be better to produce a chemical or try to produce another biofuel.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Last question, over there, last question.
Yeah, good evening. You have many experience in commercial plants. Like Indian perspective, if you see, you have shown different biofuels. Which one is the best commercial maybe happened in future in India? If not, what is the forward path for India to go ahead?
There is no best biofuel, there is no best technology. All of them, they are more or less, they can fit in the various countries, the various resources you have. Like the presentation before about biogas. Depending on the biogas that you have, you can produce biogas. There are so ways to do it. But also India, for example, we have Praj Industries. Praj Industries, we have close cooperation. They come to the conference we organize. They are working a lot. They are building many plants in Europe. At the same time, they're working a lot on ethanol from cellulosics. So it all depends on the resources and the technology you have. So there's no clear answer for that. There's no winner. It would be a mistake one to say, well, ethanol is better than DME or vice versa, or anybody to say to Indians what to do. You have to develop your own, I would say, value chains based on your resources and your own experiences. Of course, you can work with the European companies, you can work with American companies, with the Japanese organizations, and so on. We have an open society in a way. But it's for you to find your own solutions.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.